Welcome. This is the orientation for students who will be completing the second practicum for the Memorial University School Social Work BSW program, Social Work 4302. Please don't hesitate to contact a member of the field team if you have any remaining questions, queries, or concerns. Thank you, and we hope you enjoy this great learning experience as you complete the final semester of your BSW program. Throughout the orientation, we'll be talking about an overview of field education, what it is, what do students learn, what do you need to know, the roles of field instructors, and agency mentors. You'll also learn about the requirements prior to your practicum, the orientation of your practicum, requirements during your practicum, and expectations of students and field instructors and agency mentors, and recording requirements. You'll also learn about where to find key resources, forums, and templates, the evaluations to be completed, and how to get answers to any questions you may have. Field education is known as social work signature pedagogy. Signature pedagogy represents a central form of instruction and learning in which a profession such as social work socializes its students to perform the role of practitioner. Field education is the component of the curriculum in which students achieve understanding of the relevance of theory to practice and begin to develop competence in using their values, knowledge, and skills. So field practicums really are an opportunity for you as a student to move from the classroom setting into the field and into practice. As you can see in the diagram developed by Larkin, we have three cogs. One is field, one is classroom, and one is competent generalist practitioner. And what that means is that for social work as a profession, we have a classroom education, but we also have field education. So a social worker truly cannot be educated without having both in their training. Field education truly is the critical bridge between social work education and practice. This is the opportunity to take the critical knowledge, skills, and values you've learned in the classroom and then move through your practicums to strengthen and further develop those skills and knowledge in the field. Further information about the purposes and objectives of field education can be found in section 1.2 of the Field Education Manual. There are a few things to consider in regards to the purposes and objectives in field education. As mentioned, further details can be found in section 1.2 of the Field Education Manual. An important element of field practicums is that the practicum experience is not just about doing tasks and learning the specific job in an agency or specific forms that need to be completed. These aspects can change 100 times throughout your career. BSW field practicums are instead designed to serve as an educational rather than a training or work experience. Field education is about learning to become a social worker. Practicums and field instruction assist students in making the transition from active learners to professional social workers, with professional socialization being a primary focus of field education as students develop a professional self-concept. Field education is also the critical component of the curriculum in which students achieve understanding of the relevance of theory to practice and begin to develop competence in using their values, knowledge, and skills. So both practicums really are an opportunity for you as a student to move from the classroom setting into the field and into practice. During the practicum, students are expected to further develop professional values, professional identity, and skills in the art of helping. It is also important for students to know that both the BSW and MSW field programs at Memorial are designed to ensure the field practicum meet the Canadian Association for Social Work Education, or CASWE, standards for accreditation. So if you're looking for some more information on CASWE, please check out their website, and we have attached the link there for you. So let's talk about some of the people that you'll be in contact with during your practicum. First, there's the field education coordinators here at the school. So we are the people who will help you coordinate and arrange your practicum from the start to the end of the process. Your field liaison is a person who is assigned to you throughout the term, who will be in contact with you at various points to see how things are going. So if you have any questions or concerns. More than likely, one of the field education coordinators here at the school will be your field liaison, and you will be advised as to who that person is. There is an agency coordinator at your agency. It could be the person that oversees the practicum for many students. So at Eastern Health, for example, it's the professional practice consultant who is the agency coordinator for the 15 to 17 practicums we would have during a semester at that particular agency. Or in a small agency, it could be the executive director of the agency. So a field instructor is a person who has been assigned to supervise you throughout your practicum. That field instructor will be a social worker who will have either a BSW or MSW, and they will be responsible for helping you with your learning contract, as well as your weekly supervision and your midterm and final evaluation. At your agency, there may also be an agency mentor. For example, in some of our agencies, we don't have social workers on site, or the field instructor may not be on site. So the agency mentor may be assigning you tasks on a daily basis. They are your go-to person, but we may have a field instructor outside the agency who's providing the field supervision and the evaluation. So you'll be advised on that before the semester starts. So the student is you, and that is a registered student at the School of Social Work. And as well, service users are individuals, families, communities, groups, and that could be anyone who uses the services as an agency that you may be working at during the semester. Just some things for students to keep in mind prior to starting your practicum. If you have not already done so, please read and sign the Student School BSW Field Practicum Agreement and upload it to IPT. It can be found on the School of Social Work Field website. You also have to complete all agency requirements before you can start the practicum. Your field education coordinator can provide you with direction on the requirements for your particular agency. Most agencies will require that you complete a certificate of conduct and vulnerable sector check. Other agencies may have additional requirements such as a child protection clearance check, immunization records, certain training sessions, or other screening requirements. It is very important to have these documents submitted by the deadline provided by your agency. If not, it may result in a delay in your placement and delay in pay if you have a paid placement. Submitting your documents on time also gets your relationship with your agency off to a good start. Please also take the time to read over the BSW Field Practicum Checklist for students, as well as the BSW Field Manual and the Field Education Resource Manual, as well as the Significant Dates document. These 4 documents contain everything you will need to know throughout your practicum. It will be a great resource for you if you have any questions before or during your practicum. Prior to your placement, the field team will be providing updates through your MUN email, so please make sure that you keep an eye on your MUN email. Here are some things you need to know about your placement. The practicum is normally 4 days per week. This can be altered if the field instructor, agency, student, and school agree. Most students work from Monday to Thursday or Tuesday to Friday, and that may change depending on the agency. You work at your schedule with your field instructor. Usually students have an 8:30 to 4:30 or 9 to 5 arrangement, and some students will complete placement hours in the evenings and weekends. During the placement, you follow the schedule of the agency, which means you will not get a midterm break. To meet accreditation standards, you have to complete a total of 350 hours in the practicum, which does not include stat holidays, missed time, sick leave, lunch breaks, or weather-related closures. If you're away from your placement for more than 3 days, inform your field liaison of your absence. Special absences should also be discussed with the field liaison and the field instructor in advance. If you know at the beginning of the term you will need time off for any reason, that must be discussed with the field instructor and field liaison in advance. The practicum is usually 11 to 13 weeks, and under certain circumstances, placements can be longer than 13 weeks. However, it cannot be less than 11 weeks. If you complete the 350 hours in less than 11 weeks, you have to continue to attend practicum for the full 11 weeks. It is also important to keep in mind that field instructors and agencies are not expected to accommodate any other activities, such as your employment and volunteer work. While you are completing your second practicum, you'll be doing a social work course. Keep in mind that this course does not count as part of the 350 required practicum hours, so you should not be working on this course during practicum hours. Since your practicum is usually 4 days a week, you will have 1 day during the week to work on your course. Once you get into your practicum setting, there are some things you need to know. In the agency, there may be some basic requirements that they may want you to cover off, and it's important for you to know some of the important people in the agency because they are going to be able to help you with getting information that you need, such as what are your hours of work at the agency, where can you park your vehicle, what office space you're going to be working from, all those sorts of things. Some of the key contact people at your agency would be your field instructor, administrative staff, your agency mentor, agency supervisors, volunteers, and other agency personnel. It's helpful at the beginning of your practicum to introduce yourself and gain an understanding of the roles and what they do at the agency. Some agencies will have a formal orientation checklist that they will give you, and then it's your responsibility to ensure that all the items are covered off. Some agencies will also have a formal orientation in place that you may have to attend, or they may have certain modules that you might need to complete online. Some orientations may be more informal and involve a conversation with your field instructor or a supervisor at the agency. So each agency is going to be a little different. Safety is a key component of any orientation. Most agencies will have some formal processes in place around fire and safety and those sorts of things. If your agency is a smaller agency and they do not have a formal fire or safety process in place, it is important to find out what to do in case of an emergency. So in the first week or so, it's important to find out that information. What to do if there's a fire or other emergency situations such as violence or if there's a medical emergency. It's also important to become familiar with agency policies. Some agencies may have a formal agency policy manual, and you'll be asked to look through it and take a look through it. It is sometimes helpful to jot down any questions you may have, and it's completely understandable that you're not going to be familiar with everything after looking at a policy manual. But you may have to look at it the first time, and then you might be able to remind you of questions that you may have later on, and later in the practicum they have more relevance for you. Agency etiquette is also very important. What is the dress code? What's appropriate to say when you answer the phone? What's the appropriate response to service users on certain questions? So all of these things, having a little notebook around and jotting down questions as they come up or making notes on your phone can be really helpful. Then when you have a chance to meet with your field instructor or mentor, you can have a list of questions to ask them. We are now going to talk about some of the expectations for all students completing the practicum. We expect that you're going to participate actively in your own learning in the practicum, ask questions, be curious, and put yourself outside your comfort zone. Take on as many learning opportunities as possible to meet the outcomes and individual learning objectives identified in your learning contract. Also ask for feedback and be open to feedback. You will also complete the agency's orientation, assignments, observe agency policies. You'll also be preserving confidentiality, which is so important as you have a huge responsibility when working with service users and with vulnerable people and having access to their lives. During your practicum, you'll be expected to complete various practicum requirements, which we will discuss in more depth shortly. We also expect students to participate in the evaluation of self as well as evaluation of the field practicum. This will be discussed in more depth as well throughout the orientation. Now we're going to talk about student requirements during the field practicum. Please refer to the BSW Field Manual for further details. All practicum students have to complete learning tasks in number 1, as described in the BSW Field Manual under section 2.6.2b. You will do number 1 plus one other learning task as described in the manual, so either 2 or number 3, depending on the type of practicum you are completing. What are the learning tasks from number 1? The presentation is something we often get questions about from students and field instructors. There's a lot of flexibility with the topic of the presentation, so students and field instructors can be creative, not only to meet the students' learning goals, but to meet a need of the agency as well. It has to be approximately 20 minutes in length, and you and your field instructor will agree on what that topic is going to be. Many times the field instructor or agency mentor or another team member may have some ideas that have been sitting on the side of their desk that they haven't been able to get to. These pieces of work are often great learning for a student. If you are completing a project, researching a topic, or a policy for the agency, that can also be the topic of your presentation, so please keep that in mind. For example, if you are doing research on trauma-informed practice, then you can do a presentation to your team about trauma-informed practice. Or if you are doing an environmental scan of what similar agencies are doing nationally, then you can present your findings. Some students have also planned team building activities and ran those activities with the team. Other students may be involved in developing a program or policy analysis and may present on that. The options are pretty much endless. You can also partner with another student to complete your presentation. Students must just have to complete approximately 20 minutes each. If you have any questions about the presentation, don't hesitate to reach out to your field liaison. We would also like you to attend agency meetings, in-service sessions, or anything at all that is related to the agency, if it's appropriate. This could be team meetings, committees your field instructor is involved in, team planning days, training opportunities, an annual general meeting, just to name a few. Students are also required to complete a minimum of 4 agency visits during their practicum. Please ensure to discuss the agency visits with your field instructor, particularly as you are developing your learning contract. You can work together to determine what agency visits may best meet your learning goals, as well as support the work you're doing at the agency. For example, what agencies are relevant to the work at the agency, the population at the agency, what agency does your practicum agency refer to or work closely with? Agency visits are an excellent way to continue building connections within the community and gain varying perspectives and enhance the work you are doing at your agency and much more. Some agencies may provide an on-site agency visit, while others may provide an information session virtually. Some agencies may go ahead and put together an information session for students, but typically students would have to arrange a visit with an agency on their own. One thing we do strongly recommend is visiting an agency as a group. In other words, agencies would prefer to not have one student contacting them one day and another student contacting them the next. If you have a class group chat, communicate amongst yourselves that you're arranging an agency visit. Agencies will greatly appreciate this. Another important thing to keep in mind is that if you commit to an agency visit, please try to keep that commitment. We have heard of situations in the past that an agency is expecting 10 students, put effort into arranging staff to meet with students, and even buying food and providing beverages, and then only one student showing up. If you are ill or an urgent situation comes up, that is completely understandable, but it would be important to keep your commitment if at all possible. Learning tasks from number 2 would be completed by field settings engaged with work with individuals, families, or groups. These students will be working with a minimum of 7 service users throughout the term. You potentially could be working with more than that, but it would be a minimum of 7, and the length of time working with service users could be a very short period of time depending on the agency and its mandate, or it could be a longer period of time throughout the term, and that would be fine as well. You would also engage in at least one project. As mentioned, it's important to keep in mind that project can inform your presentation. The project and presentation do not have to be connected, but many students do connect their project and presentation. As with the presentation, there's a lot of flexibility with this project, so you and your field instructor can be creative. Students can do a community development project, policy analysis, research, program development, proposal writing, and committee work. The project typically not only meets some of the students' learning goals, but can also build upon capacity within an agency. Many field instructors and agency mentors have items that they would like to get to, and this is a great opportunity to not only meet your learning needs, but also the needs of the agency and team. Is there a topic or resource the team would like to know more about? Are there policies or programs that need to be updated? Is your agency trying to do an environmental scan of what other agencies are doing? Is your agency trying to develop resources for clients, such as posters, pamphlets, or social media or website content? Is there a proposal that they've been trying to get to writing, or projects on a committee that they haven't been able to get to? All these examples are excellent learning opportunities. As with the presentation, the project options are also quite endless. For placements focused on direct work with individuals, families, and groups, this is a list of the many interventions you could be involved with. So there could be screening and intake, assessment and risk assessment, referral, advocacy, resource coordination, supportive counseling, adjustment counseling, change focus counseling, psychoeducational interventions, substance use and misuse counseling, social skill or life skill development, conflict resolution intervention, family intervention, group work, case management, or discharge planning. You may be doing any of these types of work with service users after observing and learning from your field instructor. The specifics will depend on the agency, your field instructor's job, and your current skill, knowledge, and comfort level. Most students will have the opportunity to do some of these interventions, and some students will do many of them. There is no specific requirement for the number of interventions and time spent with service users. Those will vary among placements, and 2 students in the same agency may have different opportunities for working with service users. Now let's talk a little bit about the learning tasks for number 3. These are field settings engaged in work related to organizations, communities, and/or policies. So different from number 2. Students engaged with organizations, communities, and policies have opportunities to use assessment, intervention, and termination skills in at least 3 of the following categories. It could be program or event planning, marketing and implementation, program or event evaluation, small group work, team or committee or board work, task force or advocacy group involvement, coalition formulation and maintenance, meso or macro level advocacy, community analysis, community organizing, needs assessment, leadership development, staff development, policy analysis, development and management, issue analysis, organizational assessment and development, networking, social policy research, financial resource development, plan change techniques, resource development, public education, or presentations. All of these things are listed in the MUN BSW Field Manual if you want more information. So when you sit down with your field instructor to look at your learning contract and what you're going to be doing, you're going to be identifying that you're going to be doing work in at least 3 of these areas. A requirement for all students completing their second practicum is the Field Integrative Seminars. All students will be attending and participating in all 7 Field Integrative Seminars. These seminars offer opportunities for students to integrate the learning from field education practicums with learning from classroom-based courses. Most seminars will be 2 hours, and most of the seminars will be delivered synchronously through Brightspace. There will be some components that will take place asynchronously, which will be outlined in the course syllabus. There are 4 sections of the integrative seminars, and your schedule will be based on the section you are registered for. It is important to note that attendance and completion of any assignments is mandatory. The grading of the field integrative seminars is pass-fail, and students must pass both their field practicum and integrative seminars in order to pass Social Work 4302. There will be a detailed syllabus available in Brightspace, which will outline everything you need to know, including the learning objectives, attendance and participation requirements, assignments, activities, topics, and reading materials, and much more. There are other practical requirements all students will have to complete. Details of these requirements can be found in the BSW Field Manual and the following few slides. These include the timesheet and field instruction record, a daily log or daily planner recording use of time, critical reflection journals, which also includes the learning contract development and beginning of practicum critical reflection journal, as well as student assessments, so the initial student self-assessment, the student midterm self-assessment and reflection, and the student final self-assessment and reflection. And also students will be expected to complete other field setting documentation, notes, or reports as required. The first type of recording you must do on your placement is your timesheet and field instruction record, which is found in IPT. Additional information regarding IPT can be found in the BSW IPT manual, which is found on the Field Education website. Here's an example of what the timesheet and field instruction record looks like in IPT. Please follow the directions carefully. You'll be recording your time in your practicum, as well as your field instructor time with your field instructor each week. Hours of supervision is the same thing as hours of field instruction. As noted in IPT and the hours of practice rows, please record the total number of hours you were at your practicum each day. In the hours of supervision rows, please record the number of hours you received field instruction each week. Students should have a minimum of 1 hour of dedicated field instruction time per week. You do not need to record informal daily supervision, only your weekly field instruction block. Your hours of supervision should already be counted in your hours of practice, so you do not count twice. Students keep track of their hours on a weekly basis. They then total their practicum and field instruction hours at the midterm and final. Then, at the midterm and final, the timesheet and field instruction record are signed in IPT by the student, field instructor, and the agency mentor if applicable. Students are expected to keep a daily log during their practicum. Daily logs are designed to assist students in tracking their activities on a daily basis. They are also quite helpful during field instruction. There is no set format for a daily log. However, students often use an electronic calendar or diary such as Outlook Calendar, or may use a written daily planner. Students can discuss their preferred format for the daily log with their field instructor and agency mentor, if applicable. The daily logs are only viewed by the field instructor and agency mentor, except in exceptional circumstances where the field liaison would have access. Throughout the practicum, students will also be completing critical reflection journals. We will get into the requirements and expectations regarding this practicum requirement in a moment. First off, we will discuss the purpose of the critical reflection journals and what they are designed to do. One of the purposes of the critical reflection journal is to serve as a tool to develop the agenda for field instruction sessions, as well as foster open communication between the student and the field instructor and the agency mentor if applicable. The critical reflection journals also support ongoing reflection and monitoring of the learning contract and practicum requirements, as well as bridge theory and practice. They also promote self-awareness, personal development, and professional identity formation, as well as strengthening critical thinking and supporting ethical practice. It is also important for students to reflect on the broader social, political, and cultural contexts that shape social work practice. Now we are going to move on to what the requirements and expectations are in regard to the critical reflection journals. During the second week of the practicum, you will be completing the learning contract development and beginning of practicum critical reflection journal. This will be discussed more in depth later when we discuss the learning contract. A handy resource for knowing when to complete the other critical reflection journals is in the significant dates document. This document outlines when you will be completing the critical reflection journals. It is important to note that students are not expected to answer every question each week. The questions in the critical reflection journal template are intended to draw attention to key aspects of the practicum experience, support learning contract outcomes, and guide reflective practice. In consultation with your field instructor and agency mentor, if applicable, you should vary the critical reflection questions that you respond to. This will ensure that all the learning outcomes are addressed throughout the practicum and that reflections align with your individual learning goals, as well as the relevant learning opportunities emerging in your practicum setting. In addition, during the weeks that you have your integrative seminars, you can use the critical reflection journal template to develop an agenda for field instruction. You can discuss with your field instructor and agency mentor how much detail is required in a journal for these weeks. In the weeks students do not have integrative seminars, we would expect that critical reflection journal content would be more robust. When completing the critical reflection journals, you can choose to write your responses in bullet points or write brief paragraphs, whatever works for you. You will have the opportunity to have further discussion with your field instructor during field instruction sessions. As mentioned, you will be provided with the Field Education Resource Manual through email. This will be a handy document to assist with your critical reflection journals. Also, a helpful tip is to jot down ideas and reflections throughout the week as they arise. Many students find this helpful instead of responding to all relevant reflective questions at once. Once your critical reflection journal is complete, you will only need to submit it to your field instructor and agency mentor if applicable. It is, however, important to retain a copy in case this document is requested by the field team. To allow for more time for your field instructor to review the critical reflection journal, students typically email a copy at least 24 hours before a field instruction session, or a date agreed upon with the field instructor and agency mentor. During the practicum, all students will be completing self-assessments at the beginning of the practicum, at the midterm point, and at the end of the practicum. These self-assessments are called the initial student self-assessment, the student midterm self-assessment and reflection, and the student final assessment and reflection. All of these documents only need to be submitted to the field instructor and agency mentor. It is important to retain a copy, however, in case these documents are requested by the field team. Students will complete the initial student self-assessment at the beginning of the practicum. It is submitted to the field instructor and agency mentor, if applicable, prior to the first field instruction session, typically at least 24 hours in advance or an agreed upon time between the student and the field instructor. The initial student self-assessment serves many purposes. First off, it serves to enhance student self-awareness, as well as assist the student in identifying strengths and areas for growth, and promote autonomy and motivation for the student. The initial self-assessment also plays an important role in supporting the development of a strong working relationship between the student and the field instructor, and the agency mentor. The initial student self-assessment also plays an important role in helping students to articulate their learning goals, which serves as the foundation for creating the learning contract, which we will discuss later in the orientation. The next self-assessment that students will complete is the midterm self-assessment and reflection. Students will complete this at the midpoint of the practicum and will typically submit this document to their field instructor and agency mentor 1 week prior to the midterm evaluation meeting, or an agreed upon time with the field instructor and student. The midterm self-assessment and reflection is meant to be a helpful document that provides students with opportunities to review their learning contract, demonstrate their learning, and assess their progress toward achieving the identified learning outcomes in a proactive and self-directed manner. Students will also have the opportunity to identify strengths, areas for further growth, and any adjustments needed to their learning activities, as well as determine which areas of the learning contract require greater focus during the remaining practicum period. This student document also allows students to reflect on the field instruction process and offer feedback to their field instructor, identifying ways to enhance the field instruction experience and to collaborate effectively to meet the learning outcomes outlined in the learning contract. As field instructors are writing up the midterm evaluation, they are also encouraged to include comments from the midterm, the student self-assessment, and reflection. The last self-assessment you will be completing is the final self-assessment and reflection. You will complete this at the end of the practicum and will typically submit this document to your field instructor and agency mentor 1 week prior to the final evaluation meeting, or an agreed upon time by the student and the field instructor. The final self-assessment and reflection is another helpful document that provides students with opportunities to review their learning contract, demonstrate and reflect on their learning, and assess their progress toward achieving the identified learning outcomes in a self-directed manner. In addition, students reflect on their emerging professional identity, identifying strengths and areas for continued professional growth. Finally, students have the opportunity to reflect on their overall practicum experience and support a sense of closure to the field practicum. As with the midterm evaluation, when field instructors are writing up the final evaluation, they are also encouraged to include comments from the final student self-assessment and reflection. In most placements, you will be required to complete agency documentation, which follow agency format and are placed on service users or other agency files. Agency documentation is the property of the field setting. It focuses on the delivery of service and tends to be written in a summary style, often unique to the agency. Agency documentation must be read and signed by field instructors and agency mentors for legal purposes. Feedback from field instructors and agency mentors will assist you in developing a professional social work writing style appropriate for agency records, which might include reports, letters, memos, or minutes. You're probably wondering, where do I find things? And you may recall some of this from your previous placement. On the school's field website below, there are a number of helpful resources available, such as the BSW Field Education Manual, checklist for field instructors and agency mentors, checklist for students, significant dates, the user guides for IPT, and the Field Education Resource Manual. The Field Education Resource Manual will be emailed to you. It contains information on theory and knowledge and can be helpful with your critical reflection in your practicum. A number of the practicum documents can also be found on the school's field website, such as the initial student self-assessment, the Learning Contract Development and Beginning of Practicum Critical Reflection Journal, the Critical Reflection Journal template, the Student Midterm Self-Assessment and Reflection, and the Student Final Self-Assessment and Reflection. The rest of the forms are completed in IPT, which we will talk about in a moment. As you know, our Intern Practicum Tracking Database, or IPT for short, is a database that allows students, field instructors, agency mentors, and field education coordinators to efficiently and effectively complete administrative tasks related to field education. This includes keeping relevant practicum and contact information up to date and accessing and completing forms online. We have a helpful IPT manual and IPT tutorial videos available that should hopefully give you a good refresher on how to use IPT and complete the field practicum forms. They are available on the school's website. Before we get into the forms, it is important to bring up the importance of keeping your contact information up to date, particularly your emergency contact in case a medical emergency happens during your practicum and your field instructor or field liaison needs to contact them. It is also helpful to upload a picture of yourself into IPT. Now we'll move into the forms that are completed in IPT. First, we'll list the forms that are completed in IPT by the student, which include the BSW Student Application for Field Practicum and the BSW Student Brief Resume. So you would have put those in prior to your placement. The forms completed in IPT by the student and the field instructor include the timesheet and field instruction record, the learning contract, midterm evaluation, final evaluation, and both the student and field instructor complete an evaluation of the practicum. We do have expectations of field instructors, and we're going to let you know what those are as well. The field instructor assumes a major teaching role with students in the integration of theory and practice in the field. They facilitate student learning through introduction of new theories, knowledge, and research developments relevant to social work practice in the field setting. The field instructor may assign work to you, particularly if you have an on-site field instructor. This could involve the selection of cases, groups, and other activities to provide appropriate learning experiences for students. They have to make time to be a field instructor as well, and part of this involves working with you to develop a learning contract, as well as meeting at least once a week for field instruction. They must review the self-assessments, critical reflection journals, and discuss other requirements of the practicum. And also, field instructors are asked to meet a minimum of an hour a week, but some students may need additional field instruction depending on the week. This normally isn't an issue, but if you are not getting regular field instruction, you should let us know as your field liaison. Because one of the things we want to make sure is that theory and skills are integrated with practice during this experience. Field instructors also provide consultation and supervision of tasks as needed, and they review student documents and reports. And they also evaluate the student performance, and they are also required to be in consultation with the field liaison throughout the semester to provide regular updates on how students are doing in their practicum. They also must alert the student and the field liaison as to any concerns and issues. We would expect that to be the process where field instructors are working with you in terms of the practicum and identifying if there are any concerns. In an agency where we would not have an on-site field instructor, we usually have an agency mentor. They would provide day-to-day supervision and guidance for a student. We would also expect them to be involved and work in a collaborative way with the field instructor to ensure a rich experience for students. They may also assign work to students as well in consultation with the field instructor, which may include selection of service recipients to work with, projects, and other experiences. They may provide consultation and supervision of tasks as needed, and they may review student documentation and reports. They also may monitor student progress and collaborate and consult regarding the student's performance. We would also expect agency mentors to assist with the orientation process for students and ensure students have access to the resources needed within the agency. We previously discussed the various roles of those involved in field education. Scherer and Peleg-Oren use the term learning triangle to bring clarity to those involved in the field education process. The learning triangle was elaborated on by Larkin to create a visual similar to that on the slide. On this slide is a Venn diagram with 3 overlapping circles. One circle is the university, with roles such as field education coordinator and field liaison. Another circle is the student, and the other circle is the agency, with roles of field instructor and agency mentor if applicable. The concept identified that all those involved in field education, the university, the student, and the agency play a part in developing the professional social worker. This is one of the unique aspects of field education. All these vital players have unique roles, responsibilities, and expectations, yet come together to function as a whole to form the basis and vision of field education. So, social work's signature pedagogy. Now we're going to move along to the outcomes of the practicum and the learning contract. During the field practicum, students' learning is based on 5 outcomes or expectation areas. They are field setting and community context, teaching and learning context, theory and practice, self-awareness, and the professional context. When you are looking at the learning contract, which we'll be talking about shortly, it is based on these outcomes that students are expected to develop knowledge and skill in. Further detailed information can also be found in the field education manual. Now we are going to discuss the learning contract. One of the first tasks students will do during their field practicum is develop the learning contract. The learning contract is completed by the student in collaboration with the field instructor and agency mentor. The learning contract is a living document that guides the student and field instructor and agency mentor throughout the practicum and during the midterm and final evaluations. The learning contract may be revised at any point in the practicum. The learning contract is unique and tailored to the individual student and their specific practicum setting. All stated outcomes and objectives identified in the learning contract are minimum requirements. However, field practicums vary depending on agency learning opportunities and the knowledge, skills, and experiences students bring. Students, in consultation with their field instructor and agency mentor, must therefore create individualized learning objectives and identify learning activities that reflect the diversity of social work practice and support new learning. There are many purposes of the learning contract. First off, the learning contract provides a clear structure and roadmap for the practicum by outlining learning outcomes, objectives, learning activities, and the means by which they will be achieved. The learning contract also establishes a formal agreement between the student, field instructor, agency mentor, and field liaison, forming the basis for monitoring progress and conducting the midterm and final evaluations. In addition, as mentioned previously, the learning contract supports the creation of an individualized learning plan tailored to the student's unique needs and the opportunities available within the agency. The learning contract also clarifies the roles and responsibilities of both the student and field instructor and agency mentor throughout the practicum, while also ensuring the student has access to appropriate opportunities to develop and demonstrate social work values, knowledge, and skills for each identified outcome. Now we move on to the requirements and responsibilities. The student takes the lead in the development of the learning contract and finalizes the learning contract in collaboration with their field instructor and agency mentor. A tool that has been developed to assist students in finalizing their learning contract is the Learning Contract Development and Beginning of Practicum Critical Reflection Journal. One of the purposes of this document is to provide guidance for students to work collaboratively with their field instructor and agency mentor to finalize their learning contract. Students are to complete this document prior to the second field instruction session, usually 24 hours before or a time agreed upon with their field instructor. As was discussed earlier, the learning contract is meant to be individualized. Also discussed earlier, all stated outcomes and objectives identified in the learning contract are minimum requirements. So for each of the 5 learning outcomes, students must identify a minimum of 2 learning activities. And for each of the 5 learning outcomes, students must also develop a minimum of 1 individualized learning objective and a minimum of 2 additional learning activities. You can refer to the Learning Contract Development and Beginning of Practicum Critical Reflection Journal for further information, including examples regarding developing the learning activities, individualized learning objectives, and adding additional learning activities. Once the student and the field instructor and agency mentor have agreed upon the individualized learning objectives and additional learning activities, as well as the learning activities, the student would then enter them into IPT. The student and their field instructor and agency mentor then sign the learning contract in IPT. The signed learning contract is then reviewed and signed by the field liaison. There is a possibility that the field liaison may suggest revisions, as the responsibility for final approval of the learning contract rests with your field liaison. As previously noted, the learning contract is a working document and may be revised throughout the practicum. Any updates must be reflected in the most current version uploaded to IPT. Students must enter their individualized learning objectives and additional learning activities, as well as learning activities, into IPT by the 15th day of the practicum. The student and the field instructor and agency mentor must then sign a learning contract in IPT by the same date. The remaining slides will discuss the evaluations that are completed during your practicum. Additional information about the evaluations can be found in section 2.11.4 in the BSW Field Education Manual. These evaluations include the midterm evaluation of the student, the final evaluation of the student, and the student evaluation of the field practicum. So let's just talk a little bit more about the evaluations for the student. It's important to remember that your evaluation starts with the learning contract, so it actually does start at the beginning of the practicum. Although the midterm and the final are the formal evaluation periods, evaluation is meant to be an ongoing process. Completing critical reflection journals and the self-assessments are an excellent time to reflect on your own progress. Weekly field instruction sessions are also a great time to check in with your field instructor and get their feedback on your strengths, areas you can grow, and where you are in this practicum process. Ideally, any feedback at the midterm and final evaluation shouldn't be a surprise if you and your field instructor are engaged in open communication throughout your practicum. It really comes back to approaching the practicum as an adult learner, engaging in your own critical reflection, strengthening your self-awareness, and asking and being open to feedback, not just from your field instructor, but from other team members as well. We will get into the midterm and final evaluation processes in the following slides. However, it is important to know that your field instructor is responsible for writing the evaluation. Evaluation for both the midterm and a final evaluation are based on a number of factors. It's based on the student self-assessments that you complete at the beginning of the practicum, at the midterm, and at the end of the practicum. Various other practicum requirements such as daily logs, critical reflection journals, and other documentation, notes, or reports, and your learning contract and your performance. We also look at the School of Social Work Suitability Policy. If you're not familiar with that policy, you should go check it out on the School of Social Work website. The field instructor also typically engages with other team members to get their feedback, and could also be volunteers and service recipients as well. And as well, the CSW Code of Ethics, which I'm sure you are all quite aware of by now. Let's talk a bit about the rating scale that we use on the midterm and final evaluation. As you know with the learning contract, the midterm and final is all built in. It is a living document that we use, and it is the one document that has everything in it: the learning contract, the midterm, and the final. The grading choices for the midterm and final evaluations include meets expectation, so that's ME, needs improvement, NI, is not meeting expectations, and M. In terms of meeting expectations, we know that students are consistently demonstrating an acceptable level of theory and skills, creativity, critical thinking, analytical skills, communication skills, professional and ethical behavior. In terms of needs improvement, the student is demonstrating a minimal level of theory and skills, creativity, critical thinking, analytical skills, communication skills, professional and ethical behavior. So they are demonstrating that there are some of those things there, but they need strengthening and building upon it. Basically, with not meeting expectations, the student is failing to demonstrate a minimal level of theory and skills, creativity, critical thinking, analytical skills, communication skills, professional and ethical behavior. As well, we ask field instructors to provide qualitative feedback on their performance in the comment and summary sections of the midterm and final evaluation. This could include your strengths, weaknesses, and areas for future learning. All these things will be really helpful to you for your own development in your knowledge and skills in the field of social work. First, we'll be talking about the midterm evaluation. The midterm typically occurs at about week 6 of the practicum, so about the halfway point. The midterm evaluation is completed by the field instructor, typically in consultation with other team members, whether that be an agency mentor, volunteers, or clients if appropriate. The midterm evaluation will summarize the student's activities in the practicum, the student's strengths and areas for improvement, general level of student competence in regards to social work values, knowledge, and skills at that point of evaluation, plans for student activities and emphasis from the midterm to the end of the practicum, as well as students' needs for learning and development and requisite learning opportunities. Prior to the midterm evaluation, students are required to complete the midterm self-assessment and reflection, which can be found on the field education website. Students are asked to submit this to their field instructor 1 week prior to the midterm evaluation meeting or an agreed upon date with the field instructor. The field instructor and agency mentor, if applicable, completes a draft in the midterm evaluation using the learning contract. Field instructors are encouraged to include components of the student's midterm self-assessment and reflection in the midterm evaluation in IPT. A formal evaluation takes place, usually during a regularly scheduled field instruction session. This would include the field instructor and student and the agency mentor, if applicable. We usually recommend field instructors to provide students with a draft of the evaluation 24 hours in advance of this meeting to give students the opportunity to reflect on the evaluation. Following the meeting, the field instructor would finalize the evaluation in IPT, and the student, field instructor, and agency mentor then electronically sign the evaluation in IPT. If for some reason there are any concerns, the field instructor would clearly document them and discuss them with the student. More than likely, the field liaison would then meet with the student and the field instructor. We would talk about any particular concerns and areas of growth and develop a plan together to work toward meeting the outcomes and expectations of the practicum during the second half. As would be expected, the final evaluation occurs at the end of the practicum, typically during the last week. The process of the final evaluation is very similar to the midterm evaluation. Similar to the midterm evaluation, students are required to complete the final self-assessment and reflection, which can be found on the field education website. Students are asked to submit this to their field instructor 1 week prior to the field final evaluation meeting, or an agreed upon date with the field instructor. The field instructor would write up a draft of the final evaluation and provide the student with some time to review it, often 24 hours in advance. The field instructor and student would then meet to discuss the final evaluation, typically during the final field instruction session. Usually when writing the evaluation, the field instructor seeks additional feedback from the agency mentor if applicable, as well as other team members, volunteers, and possibly even service recipients. If a student has an agency mentor, the agency mentor would typically be present during the evaluation meeting as well. Field instructors are also encouraged to include content from the final self-assessment and reflection in the student's final evaluation in IPT. Some questions the final evaluation usually addresses include: were all the goals met? Has the student completed the minimum expected outcomes? What are the final thoughts about the student and the practicum experience? As well as what are the student's strengths? What are areas for further professional development? And the evaluation may also address the student's suitability for the profession. Following the final evaluation meeting, the final evaluation must be signed and dated electronically in IPT by the student, field instructor, and the agency mentor if applicable. It is also important to keep in mind that many field instructors often use the final evaluation as a foundation for future professional references. So there is an evaluation of the agency and the field instructor as well. Verbal feedback is provided by the student during the practicum, but the student has an opportunity to complete an evaluation form after the final evaluation of the student is submitted. It is only shared with the field instructor if the student agrees unless the CASW Code of Ethics is breached. If the code is breached, the concerns must be addressed to the field liaison and through the agency. Students have also been asked to be aware of agency policies and procedures, to become familiar with them and understand what they mean. CASW stresses the importance of confidentiality when working with clients, and as a student, we ask that you are respectful of confidential client information and handle it appropriately. We also ask that students be familiar with the social media policy and guidelines for social work students. Social media was never an issue years ago, but now it is. So we ask that you become familiar with the social media policy and take a look at your own social media and whatever you have out there in the World Wide Web and see whether or not it is appropriate. Private cell phone usage at the agency should not be occurring. Keep in mind that if you wish to look at apps, check social media, or check personal email, etc., that should be done during your break time, which would include breaks or at lunchtime. Keep in mind boundaries. Think about what the Code of Ethics says about boundaries and make sure that if you have any questions at all that you discuss it with your field instructor, staff at the agency, or your field liaison. It is important that you are appropriately dressed when you are at the agency. Take your lead from your field instructor and from the other agency staff. And there may be times where it is completely appropriate for you to be wearing jeans, but just take the lead from them. Also keep in mind, from a safety point of view, the agency may have some requirements around the type of dress that you use, such as footwear. If you are not going to be at the agency, please make sure that you let your field instructor know and any appropriate staff that they have designated. It's important for them to know that you are not going to be there. A lot of things happen in communities these days, and sometimes the media would like to get some information or a comment. You are at your agency as a student, so if you're approached by the media for a comment over an issue that is happening in the community, please keep in mind that you are there in that student role, and as the other agency staff, be that your field instructor or appropriate agency personnel who will be addressing these issues. You should be mindful of the fact that you are there as a student, and your role is to be there to learn, develop, and grow your social work skills and knowledge, not to respond to questions from the media. We have reached the final slide in the orientation. We hope that it was helpful. Reach out to a member of the field education team if you have any questions. Most of you know Greg, and he will be able to answer many of the questions you may have. If not, he will be able to connect you with the relevant field education coordinator. Meanwhile, your field liaison will be in touch early in the semester, and you can contact them as needed. If you have any questions about your practicum, be sure to let your liaison know so they can work with you to resolve things. Thanks again.